Dead men tell no tales, but their ships speak volumes. Welcome to the Cursed Compass, where we explore the darkest maritime mysteries. In February 1821, a whale ship called the Dolphin was sailing off the coast of Chile when its crew spotted something drifting in the swells. It was a battered, sun-bleached whaleboat, barely staying afloat. Inside were two emaciated men, Captain George Pollard and a sailor named Charles Ramsdell. They were completely unresponsive to their rescuers. Delirious from starvation, the two men were frantically gnawing on the bones of their dead shipmates. Months later, another missing boat from their expedition washed up on a remote Pacific island. Inside it were nothing but 4 sun-scorched skeletons. To understand how elite Nantucket mariners, the most disciplined professionals of their age, ended up skeletal and delirious in a drifting boat, we first have to look at the world they left behind. In 1819, whaling was a highly lucrative and deeply violent industry. Before petroleum, the modern world was literally lit and lubricated by oil harvested from whale blubber. But demand for that oil was so high, hunters nearly wiped out the whale populations in the Atlantic Ocean. To find their prey, ships like the Essex sailed thousands of miles further, rounding South America into the uncharted Pacific depths. By venturing this deep into the Pacific, the crew left the known world behind, placing 20 lives entirely on the strength of a single wooden hull. From the start, the voyage was rough. A sudden squall nearly sank the Essex right out of the gate, but they pushed on, eventually stopping in the Galapagos Islands to restock, hoarding 300 live giant tortoises in their hold for meat. Their confidence quickly crossed over into extreme hubris. While hunting on Charles Island, one of the helmsmen lit a fire as a prank. In the dry season, the flames quickly burned out of control, leaving the entire island behind them a blackened, smoking husk. By November 20, 1820, the Essex was 2,000 miles off the western coast of South America. That morning, the crew spotted a sperm whale. There was an 85-foot male, and it was acting strangely. Instead of fleeing, the massive animal turned and swam directly at the ship. Picking up speed, it rammed the Essex, rocking it violently. Then, with seemingly calculated vengeance, it circled back and struck the vessel a second time, shattering the ship's wooden bow. Water flooded the hull instantly. The 20-man crew barely had time to salvage navigational instruments and meager supplies before abandoning the ship. They were now stranded in the middle of the open ocean in 3 leaky 28-foot rowboats. In a matter of hours, the apex predators of the ocean had been reduced to vulnerable prey, completely at the mercy of the elements. This map shows where the Essex sank. Tahiti lay 1,200 miles west. Pollard suggested riding the currents there. The chase, terrified by rumors of cannibals, convinced the captain to aim for South America, a grueling 4,000-mile journey against the wind. A month later, starving and dangerously dehydrated, they stumbled onto the barren coral reef of Henderson Island. They exhausted the island's tiny supply of birds and crabs in just 1 week. 3 men chose to stay behind, while the remaining 17 pushed back out into the open water. Back at sea, their rations of bread and water ran out completely. As exposure and disease took their toll, the men began to die. At first, they buried their dead at sea, but as starvation ravaged their bodies, they made the grim decision to keep the corpses to feed the living. By February, the food on Captain Pollard's boat was gone once again. Unable to hold out any longer, the surviving men agreed to a terrifying maritime custom. They drew straws to determine who would be sacrificed to keep the others alive. The short straw was drawn by Owen Chase, Captain Pollard's 16-year-old cousin. The boy accepted his fate. They drew straws again to choose the executioner. The duty fell to Charles Ramsdell, Coffin's own friend, who shot him so the rest could eat. Their decision to sail east had sealed their fate. Driven by an irrational fear of encountering foreign cannibals, the sailors forced themselves into a corner where they had to commit the exact act they were trying to escape. 90 days after the whale struck, an English ship spotted Owen Chase's boat. 5 days after that, the Dolphin intercepted Captain Pollard. Months later, a trading vessel rescued the 3 men who stayed behind on Henderson Island. The final human cost was staggering. Out of a crew of 20, only 8 men survived. 7 of their crewmates had been eaten in the open ocean. The survivors eventually reached South America and slowly made their way back to Nantucket. They returned to a town that viewed them with a mixture of pity and revulsion for what they had done to stay alive. Captain Pollard took command of one more whaling vessel, which he promptly shipwrecked. Branded a cursed captain, a Jonah, he spent the rest of his life working as a night watchman. Every single year, on the November 20th anniversary of the sinking, he locked himself in his room and fasted. Owen Chase's own mind fared even worse. Haunted by his ordeal, he spent his later years quietly hiding stashes of food in the attic of his home, driven by an ingrained, uncontrollable terror that he would start starving again. Decades later, a young writer named Herman Melville met Captain Pollard on the streets of Nantucket and read the crew's harrowing accounts. Melville used the sinking as the direct historical inspiration for his classic novel, Moby-Dick. Melville's novel explores the revenge of a white whale, but the historical record of the Essex documents the collapse of the human mind. It is a chronicle of what ordinary men become when civilization is stripped away.